welcome everyone for joining in today's webinar from Team Tech Scalable. So just to give you a quick brief on the company Tech Scalable. Tech Scalable provides services across training and consulting domain focused on cloud, DevOps, machine learning, data science and artificial intelligence. And for today's webinar, Mamta Jha is a speaker. So she will be presenting a webinar on Azure Devops. So just to give you a quick brief about Mamta Jha. Mamta Jha has a 16 plus years of experience wherein she has worked on different cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. And she has a hands-on experience migrating, automating and optimizing mission critical deployments in various cloud platforms, leveraging configuration management, CI/CD pipeline, and Devops tools. So over to you, Mamta. So she will be starting off the webinar on Azure Devops.
Thanks, Gopal. Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you.
Yep. So let's look at today's agenda. What all we would be covering in 2 hours of session. So we would be starting with what exactly is Azure Devops, what all tools do we have in Azure Devops that we would be looking at. We would be talking about majorly about Azure Repos because we are focusing today on continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. So we would be looking at Azure Repos, how to place our code in Azure Repository that we would be discussing about. Then we would look at Azure Pipeline. So Azure Pipeline comes with your build and the release pipeline. So we would be talking about continuous integration and continuous delivery. We would look at multiple stages building up in the release pipeline, and we would see how we can deploy that in our Azure infrastructure. So that would be the part of the demo. Setting up Azure Repository, building a project, setting up Azure Repository, then doing an integration pipeline, which is a build pipeline, and finally we would be deploying that into our Azure infrastructure. We would look at the learning path at the end of the session, which would give you a brief overview about what all things we need to know in case we are targeting for an Azure DevOps Expert exam. Which all modules are important, how much weightage they have in the examination, and what all topics or what all hands-on exercises can we expect and what we need to practice to work on Azure DevOps as a DevOps engineer or DevOps expert. So this is today's agenda. Let's start with introduction to Azure DevOps. So when we think about Azure DevOps is no much different from a normal DevOps, right? So if we think of word DevOps, it is integration of a development team and an operation team that everyone knows within a name itself. But when we talk about DevOps, it's just not a single tool or a single phase of the software development lifecycle. Rather, the life cycle starts from the planning phase, from the phase we are gathering the requirement, we are segregating the requirement, we are assigning teams, we are creating stories to implement the stuffs, or stories even to plan and plot our entire project. So from the planning phase, we have tools like a lot of people would have heard about tools like Jira. Azure DevOps comes with a mapping tool for most of the tools in the software development lifecycle. So how we use Jira from, like, I think I was using Jira for around 8 to 9 years from the time we started adapting Agile. So Jira is a substitute for Azure Boards, you can say. Then we move on to the coding phase. We have planned it well. It's time for the execution. When we start coding, that is when we need to keep our code repositories in a central location so that all the team members would be able to contribute to it, collaborate, people can review from it and all. So we would be using a repository server where we can push in our code. So for that also we would be using tools like earlier we had TFS from Microsoft. These days it is replaced by Azure Repos. Then we move on to the build phase. Day in, day out, people are coding and everyone's code gets merged. Earlier, what used to happen, we used to do build once in a fortnight or once in a month. And we used to get a hell lot of issues, and it used to be very difficult to find out whose bug it is or in which module exactly the bug is. And the root cause analysis used to take a huge amount of time. So people started building that very frequently, and that could be only possible due to different sorts of automation tools which came into existence, starting from Jenkins, the beautiful Jenkins tool, which has been there for years together. I remember when I started my career in 2003, Jenkins was there that time as well. And Jenkins has enhanced all its features and adapted to different newer technologies or newer, plugins which has come in the market. It adapts everything, and it's a beautiful tool. So Azure Devops comes into competition with Jenkins with Azure Pipelines, a build and a release pipeline tool. So after building, in case we want to do testing, we want to do any type of testing, could it be a UA test, a load test, a performance test, we can have n sort of test cases, right? Integration testing, feature testing. So as and when, the beautiful thing with Agile and DevOps going hand in hand is that whenever we have these phases of different life cycles, stops when we get feedback immediately from there. Finally, when we are happy with our product, when we are happy with our feature, we move on to the release phase where we start deploying. And in the deployment phase, operations team's task becomes pretty crucial, right? The people need to operate, people need to monitor, the performance monitoring needs to be there, logging has to be in place. So n number of tools there also comes into existence, making our life more simplified and easier for us to go ahead and resolve the issue or identify the issues much before it actually hampers the entire product. So this was about the DevOps. DevOps is nothing but taking your product or a small feature through each of these life cycle stages and delivering that with a good satisfaction to the customer, I would say. Because when we talk about DevOps, it's just not about delivering something, it's about continuous feedback, it's about the satisfaction of the customer, it's about time to market, it's about producing a minimal viable product so that we are quicker to market as well, right? So if you think about the DevOps wheel, it's a wheel which constitutes of n number of phases. Going from one phase to the other, we need to be very quick, and that is where the existence of these DevOps tools comes. We incorporate tools in every phase of the software development life cycle. I understand DevOps is like an ocean and people are like very confused. What sort of tools should we use? Should I use Jenkins? Should I use that? Should I use Travis CI? Should I use Bamboo? Or in case of Git, should I use GitHub? Should I use GitLab? Should I use Git Bitbucket? N options were there in the market. And when Azure came with Azure Devops, they wanted to simplify the life of the Azure developers or any, like it could be a DevOps engineer or a guy whoever is using using Azure day in, day out. They want them to use inbuilt tools. They have all the services, all the full palette of services which can help us to start from planning till the delivery phase to monitoring to operating. Everything comes in a single package. So we would be discussing about the Azure DevOps features today. And just to name them, Azure DevOps comes with first the Azure Boards, which helps us in keeping track of stuffs in a good way. We can plan out our stuffs. We can have stories defined. We can have our task defined. We can have assignments to the team members. We can track them. How in case of Agile, we do a burn down chart. All those things can be done with the help of the Azure Boards. Then the second tool which comes in Azure DevOps services is Azure Repos, which helps us in keeping our code in a central location, the code repository solution. Then we move on to the third one, which is Azure Pipelines. And this Azure pipeline is actually broken down into two. One is the build pipeline and other is the release pipeline. So build pipeline helps us in building and release pipeline helps us in deploying the code. The fourth option is the Azure test plans, in which you can keep your test cases, you can have manual testing, you can have automation, you can keep all your test cases in a place, you can track them, you can track the bugs, you can have your teams assigned to it, and you can track everything from a single portal. The last one is the Azure Artifacts. Artifact is something which is a very generic name. Artifact can be the name for a package which I download, could be a Java package, could be a .NET package, could be a Python package, which is released by the companies itself, like Python releases the newer version of Python, that is also called as an artifact. The output which we produce after the build of our code, that is also called as an artifact. So we have a placeholder to keep all these things so that we can pick it up from there and use it for deployment, or we can pick up the packages and use them during the build process. Today, we would be majorly focusing on Azure Repos and Azure Pipelines. Pipelines is the main area of focus because these are pretty huge topics. We can't cover them in a day. So we would be discussing first about the continuous integration and then the continuous delivery. Let me just plot and show you what exactly we wish to do. Just give me a second. So we plan to have a infra setup in our Azure account. So this is my Azure account. And in that, I would set up my infrastructure. I would set up my infrastructure means I would be deploying my resources in the servers which are running in my Azure account. So I would be creating a SQL server. I'm using Azure SQL. So this is my Azure SQL server, which I would be deploying. And I would have web app service, platform as a service offering from Azure that we would be using. So I have app service. In this, I would be creating one app service for QA, and I would be creating another app service for prod. So this is one app service and this is one app service. We have two app services. This is for the prod. So what happens when you deploy a user who has to log in and see your say your website which you have deployed, the request would be routed here. We would test and we would make sure everything is working fine in the QA. And in between, I would be cutting this into two slots. In app services, we can create slots. And I would be making this as prod, which would be visible to our customers. And I would make one slot for staging. This would be for staging and this would be for production. So these both are actually, just to save the time, both of them are connected to the same backend, the same SQL database, but actually in the production, it would not be like that. Our production SQL server should be different. So this is my Azure infrastructure. Now coming to our, say, Azure Devops. So Azure Devops is separately in dev.azure.com. So you can think this is my Azure Devops account. Inside that, first we create an organization. Inside organization, you have projects. And inside project, you would have all the features like boards to track your stories, your tasks and everything. Then you have repos to keep your code. You would get the pipeline. Then you have artifacts. And finally, you have the test plans. So our focus area is this and this. We would be working on this. Okay, so I would be creating. So now the code has to reside somewhere. Let me clean up this person who's accessing our website. Once the website is up, I'll bring that person back into place. Now, let me first draw my laptop. So I have a laptop of mine, and this laptop is my personal laptop here, my MacBook, in which I have my code residing. I am going to create a Git repository. I'll come to these keywords which are there. If you don't know what exactly is Git, then we would be discussing about that as well. Don't worry. Let me see if there are any questions in between. Okay. So we would be coming to slots and everything. Don't worry. And let's first figure out what all things we would be doing. So code would be residing as a Git repository. And here, the code which is present, I would be syncing my code. This is my source. I'll be putting my code here. So this is the central repository where my code would be residing. And this is the local. So this is called as local repo. And this is called as remote repository, remote location. So like this, multiple people can be there, those who contribute to the same code here. So we would be checking in our code here time to time. Whenever we make changes, we can push in our code here. And our code, which is residing here, would be picked up by the build pipeline. So this pipeline would be broken down into two parts. One would be the build, and the other one would be the release. Code would be picked up by build, and then it would be triggering a release, which would be actually going and deploying our resources in our So my release pipeline will have multiple stages. Stage 1 would deploy in QA, and stage 2 would deploy in my staging environment. That means this. So staging would be deploying here, and then when I'm happy, I'll do a swap of my code. So this would be our agenda today. We would be doing this, and let me save this and explain you a few things about the, let me name it so that I would Okay, so let me bring up a new page. We were talking about Azure Repos, right? So first we will discuss about organization, and I'll parallelly show you this on the dev.azure.com as well. So I have my Azure account. In my account, I can have several organizations. It's just not one. And in every organization, I can have several projects as well. So when you would create multiple organizations, when you create multiple projects, when you have different business needs, then you create multiple organizations. When I have different teams, different code bases, that time I create multiple projects. In this project, we would have the repository. And in Azure Repository, there are multiple ways of picking up the code. When you create a repository, it will ask you that is it residing in a remote location, then you can take it from there, or your code is residing in Git, even you can pick it up from there. If your code is residing in Bitbucket, even you can reference over there and build it. So let me parallelly show you this Azure Repos. I was just checking on the questions. So this is my dev.azure.com, And next to that, if you see, these are the organizations. So here, Azure dev.azure.com is the name, is the account. I've logged in with my credentials of mamta.chaudhary.techscalable.com. Then inside that, you have organizations here. You can create new organization from here. I'm not going and creating organization, rather I'm living with a existing organization. In this organization, there are options to create several projects. 2 projects are lying here already. Let me create one more project. You can give a project name. Let me say Demo Feb 9th. And I can create public projects. I can create private projects. Private projects, I can create only one in the free trial. If I have public projects, I can create n number of projects. So creating a public project at this point in time is okay, but when you're working in a real-time work environment, we would be creating private projects. So it's taking a while to create the projects. Correct. So project is created. Now we are inside Demo Feb 0. Why did I name it as Feb 0? Okay, let it be. Now, if we go into the project settings, here you can change the name as well and save it. You can change the visibility. I want to name it as Demo Feb 9th. I can do that. I understand that I'm renaming it, it is asking. So I have to give the exact name I've given there. There I had given in a small f, so I'm doing that here. It's renamed as Feb 9th. Visibility is giving here who is the project's administrator, which all tools I wish to use in it. Could be a possibility in a particular project. You don't need boards. You don't need to have them. You don't need a test plan, then you don't need to have them as well. So here, if you look, we would be focusing on repos and pipeline, but I'm just leaving this all these options on. I can have team options here. You can have add team members here. You can create teams. You can have users inside that. Here, let's focus on the pipeline section. I'll come back here when we have the pipelines. The board section is also here. So we have the boards options. You can do some project level configuration. Which type of board you need, you can plan it out here. I am planning to follow complete Scrum. I need agile type of board. Which type of board? The way we track our project, right? That sort of configuration can be done from here. I'm not going deep into boards because our focus is pipeline and repositories today. Here, repository option is given. Already one is shown up here. So let's go and click on the repository section. So here, this was the project setting, which I went at the bottom. On the top, here, you have few options. This is the general overview of my project, which just says welcome to project. I can have my entire project dashboard, beautiful dashboard shown up here. I can have the burn down charts, the bugs which I want to quickly track. Those things can showcase here. You have the dashboards options to do that. So you can add widgets which you need and you can plan it out. This is the board section in which we are not going in case you want to plan out your sprints, you want to have your work items defined, you can do it right away here. We are focused in building our repository. So what we would do, my code is residing in my local system and I want to push it over here. So what it says, push an existing repository from command line. I want to do that. Or you want to initialize it from the scratch, or you want to clone it to your computer. If you have Visual Studio, you can do that as well. I want to do this. So let me pick it up from here and go to my, actually I got to get this next to my stuff. Cool. So now I have my code here. If you just see, I am in a particular path. I have a .NET code base residing here. If I do ls-lrt, there's a code. Git init is done or not, you can check by ls-la. Git init is done. So Git is a way of keeping your code together and tracking your code. If you're making changes to your code, what changes have gone in, who checked in, all those things can be done in the local itself, and you can push your code to the remote server. So Git provides you a way to collaborate so that people can collaborate together, right? So I have initialized the Git by just saying Git init. It defines this code directory as a Git repository as soon as you do that. I would copy paste the command it had given. So I'm saying my remote server where I want to push my code is this. And I would say git add. I'll add all the files which are residing in this folder and let me commit them. Say first commit to be very simple. Nothing is there to commit at this point, no changes. Let us push that with git push origin. I want to create say the main, what is that called as the branch? Sorry, I was not getting that word. Okay, so we want to create a main branch called as master here. So let me explain that as well. So in the Git here, we have picked up the code from remote server from my laptop, and I have created a branch called as master branch. Later, what happens in a real-time project, we branch out from here and we create feature branches. Normally, we create a developer branch, and from there, we create feature branches. So what happens? This is the place from where you forked out and you started your development branch. In the development branch, people have checked in some things. From there, you have taken out the feature branch, and in the feature branch, I keep delivering the feature code. And one day when my feature is well tested, I would push that to the actual branch over here, which is my developer branch. Let me extend this line. And someday this developer branch would again merge into the main branch of the master. So this is the branching strategies which we normally cover in the sessions as well. So for this, you will have to learn Git commands, how to do Git branching, how to create a repository. So we have like, I did Git init to initialize my repository. You can do Git add to inform Git that there are a set of files which I would be actually, say, committing in the future. And when you say commit, we would be committing that code to the local, and with the git push, we would be doing that to the remote. So git commit always makes a concrete changes or writes the history in the local system, the local repository. And when you want to push your code to the remote repository, we do git push. And just now I did a git push. So what happened? Whatever code was residing in my local, that is now pushed into the Azure Repos, and I can see it here. Let's see that how do you look for it over here. So I have pushed in, and here it says that it has pushed a new branch called master has been created here. And this is my link of that dev.azure.com, right? Let's do that. So here all my code is residing. The entire code base is now showing up here. Whatever code was there in my local, it's now pushed in over here. And my local is in sync with this remote. If I make changes there, that would reflect over here. That's the beauty of it. And you can think how I have the code in my laptop, there would be several developers, those who would be having the code in their laptop, and time to time when they make changes, they would be pushing their code to the central server. Now this code preparation is done. And in case it asks you to validate, Like for example, I had already created a token, and that's the reason it didn't ask me to validate the code. So here on the right hand side, next to your name, you should find a user settings. Just click on that and you would find multiple ways to authenticate. SSH keys is the more used way, but personal access token is, for now, you can certainly do that. It's a public repository, so it's not a threat to have that. So we can create a token here, just trying to show you creation of a token, say token 2. And you can give access on the work items, what level of access, on the code, what level of access, on the build, what level of access, on the release, what level of access, in case of test management, what level of access you want to give. So whoever uses this token would get that level of access, which you have defined over here. So here, if you see, I want to give full access, then all the options would go off. And if you want to be very precise, then you can check like this. I just want to give read and execute, read and exchange. You can check the checkboxes and give the access. You can even give the expiry of this token which would get created. Here you can select the organization. I can even have a single token which is accessible throughout the organization. The next option. I'm just picking up this organization and saying create. This is the token which is there. So in case when you create a repository for the first time, it would ask you to feed in the password when you want to do git push. And that is when you can give this key, the token which has been generated. This would help us in pushing or authenticating ourselves with your Azure Devops account, so that when I do a git push, it authenticates, yes, a valid user is actually pushing the code to the account. Just closing this. I didn't have to copy that, but just keeping a note of it, just pasting it here and saying, doing nothing. So I'll just clear out the stuffs. So code repository has reflected there. Now things are fine. I can go ahead and start building a pipeline to build this code of mine. So I have a .NET code, and I would be using this .NET code to be built and to be deployed in my web app server. So let's go back to our, say, Azure Devops. Clicking on that, going back to my demo Feb 9th project. Repo is all set. Now going to the pipeline section. So here the option comes to create a pipeline. Hit on that. It will give you option. If you are good in YAML coding, you can do that. If you are having your code residing already in Bitbucket or Git Enterprise, you can even choose that and have your entire code pipelines code taken here. But I'll be going into a classic editor because a lot of time people are not proficient enough in YAML coding. That would be confusing for them. So I'm saying that in this project, whenever I'm building, I would pick up the code from the Azure Repo. So Git is a way of managing the code. Git has become a de facto of code management. When you say Azure Repository is managing a Git repo, Azure Repository is a tool which is managing the repository of the entire code in the way Git does. Bitbucket also manages the entire code base the way Git does. So everywhere the Git commands would be working. Hope everyone is doing good. Can I have a quick yes in case we are understanding? How do we attach a personal access token to the local Git? So here, nothing we have to do, Aman. We just need to, whenever you do a Git push, that time it would be prompting you for the password. As soon as it prompts you for the password, you can just feed in that token. That should be sufficient to tag it. And you have seen that I have done it one time. That's the reason it is not asking me again. Yeah, it supports a monorepo as well. It supports multi-repositories as well. And when code will get updated in Azure, now itself the code would get updated in Azure. If you want to see that, I can show you right away. Just quitting from here and going to one of the files. Let's say Paths Unlimited. Let me pick up a file. Let's say this file. Okay, I've made a change here in the code base that is reflecting here. Let's go and do that change here. So let me move into SRC and then Paths Unlimited, models if I'm not wrong. And inside that, the file is there. Let me see, I have picked up category.cs. And this code base, if I am saying, let me go to Feb09, and I'm deleting the string and I'm saying live demo. So I'm not changing any logical code here. I'm just changing a command because everyone doesn't understand .NET code, right? Someone may be proficient in Java, someone knows C, C++. I'm just making changes in the code in the command section. That is also a code change. You have to do git add and say that I plan to check in this code someday, and I'm going ahead and committing it. Git add is the place when your Git repository starts tracking your file and the changes. Now let me do second change and commit it. Now the changes are in local. Still, if I go and I check here, my changes will not be there. Let me quickly refresh this. You would not find my changes yet reflected here. But as soon as I do git push origin master, it would push my code changes. Do you see this? It is pushing my code changes to the remote server. Let me do a refresh again over here, and you should find the change reflecting. So whenever you do a git push, that is when your code gets updated in your Azure Repository. We would be stitching up an entire pipeline in a way that as and when I would update the code, repository is updated, build pipeline is triggered, and deployment pipeline is triggered. That's our agenda for today. So code is updated. Hope that makes sense. So there's a question saying that what is the difference between a Git, GitHub, and Bitbucket? So Git is a open source command line tool for managing the code locally. GitHub is a remote server as a community server provided by Git itself, and Bitbucket is from Atlassian. They use Git way of managing their code. So Git, when it came to the market, it became so famous that people started to manage the repository in the way Git did. And it was an open source, so everyone has adapted the way of managing and tracking the code with the help of Git. Yes, in case we want to do the credential pull as well, Vivek, we can do that. In Windows, we have the credentials manager. You can even use that. But in Mac, I don't have that. That's the reason I didn't use it. I would let the prompt come and ask me the password for the first time, and I just feed in that time. So you can see the commits here. The commits have come. The changes are showing here. What changes I have done, that also can be seen over here. If any pushes have happened, that also would be shown up here. The push has happened at what time, by who, all those details would show up here. You can see there is a commit ID associated over here. When I was drawing this round buttons or the round circles here, they indicated the commit ID. Each time you push, you would be having an ID associated to it. All the file changes which have been committed can be tracked from a single place. You can see the summary and you can see the commits as well. Here, there is a single commit with a single file. It will show you the file change as well. This is the line which is deleted and this is the one which is added. You can see here the green ones show that it is added, and the light red one shows that they are deleted. Azure Repos is a place where you can host your public repositories as well. So you can say that it is competitor of GitHub. GitHub comes only with the solution of handling repositories. Now they are coming up with build and release as well. But Azure Repos is a central place where you have all the things from tracking to keeping repositories, from pipeline to everything. So Repo is one part of that particular Azure Devops services offering. Both are competitors. GitHub and Azure Repositories are competitors. Azure Repositories is more safer to use. It, in the sense, it's more easier to use when you're using Azure. Now, done with the Git section, let's move on to the pipeline and see the beauty of our build and the release pipeline. Just keeping an eye on the time as well. So in the create pipeline section, I'll move on to the classical editor because I'm not planning to provide the build code in YAML language. Rather, you can think I'm a layman and I am first time using my Azure DevOps, how I can pick and choose the stuffs and make my life simpler. And the time I become proficient, I can even convert my existing pipelines into YAML, become an expert in YAML coding, and then start using the other options. So you can code your pipeline in YAML, or you can go from the classical editor and pick and choose the options as well. So both ways are possible. Now I am saying that the code which would be used for building would be picked up from this repository. And if I have multiple branches, you can even specify the build would be done on the branch level. It's just not on the master level, right? Master codes would be built separately. The code on the feature branch would be built separately. The code on the dev branch would be built separately. So we can have separate pipelines for each of the branches which you have. At present, we just have one branch. So here, I'm just living with the master branch and I say continue. Which type of template I can choose? So here you can see there are n number of options, right? How I want to build it, that sort of template I should choose. Because my code is a ASP.NET code, I would choose this. If I have to build something in Docker container, I can pick this. If I have a Python package, I pick this. If I have ASP.NET Core, then I pick this. I have n sort of options over here. If I want to build Azure functions, I want to use Azure Repo for Java, I can go with this. I want to do a Gradle build. I want to queue the things to Jenkins to build it. I can even go to that. So here I may be creating a build pipeline, but still can trigger my Jenkins to pick up the build. That also can be done. So you can integrate your Jenkins with the pipeline. So here you see that as soon as I picked up that option, all the tasks are populated. Now, coming to one of the important sections, whenever you are saying build, don't you think that you would need servers to build it? Where exactly this build would be happening is the question. So let's go back and look here. So we have our code residing here. And in this, I am going to trigger a build. So I will say build pipeline. Don't get confused. The word pipeline in Azure has two parts, the build pipeline. Build pipeline would need agents on which I can do my build. Agents can be of two types. Either on the need basis, you can look for your Microsoft hosted agents. That means whenever you say, hey, I want to build The cloud provider itself provides you with a temporary server. Till the time build executes, the server is with you. Once the build execution is done, the server is released. So this is your Microsoft, it is called as Microsoft hosted agent, or you can even have your self-hosted agent. Your self-hosted agent can be in two different places. Your self-hosted agent can be residing in your, say, it can be residing in your on-premises. You need to install agents so that it can talk to your Azure Devops, or it can be in your cloud infrastructure as well. You can place it anywhere. I can take a virtual machine and install agent in it and declare it as a agent, self-hosted agent. Disadvantage with this is this agent has to be up and running. You need to configure, install the packages, upgrade it, maintain it, keep it up and running. And in cloud, you know, if a server is running, it's charged. Every minute is charged, right? So here, if my infrastructure is running in cloud, I would be paying for it. But here, if I'm going with Microsoft hosted agent, it would be cheaper. Whenever build is happening, I would be using that server and releasing the server. So I would be just charged for the time the build is being executed. We can get multiple flavors, like you have Windows Server 2019, 2016, you have Ubuntu servers, you have Mac servers, you get n number of options here. Same for the self-hosted agents as well. So this agent defines where my build would get executed. So there is a temporary server residing wherein you would be executing your build. So let me save this. Oh, what happened? It's not liking me to change. Just give me a minute. And let me open back my previous one. So as soon as you do build, here, let me pick up a different color. I will have a server hosted somewhere in Azure. So I'm just drawing it here. It's not that it is hanging in the universe, but it is with Azure, the cloud provider. But not in your account, okay? It's somewhere with your cloud provider. So this server would do the build. You specify what type of operating system, you specify what packages you need, and you deploy your code here. And then the build would happen. So let's see how do we do this. Now, moving on to our pipeline. Here, it would ask which version of code you want to pick up. I'm just living with 4.4.1. My code works with that. Here, I am having a restore command to be executed. The code would get built, and then finally a build output has to be executed. Build output or artifact would get produced. So if you see here, the command which I'm executing is this, and this is auto-populated, okay? I have not written even a single word. So the server which is there, in that there is a standard folder from where the code would be picked and built. If you see, there are a few variables residing here. Like the variables can be identified by the word $ in front of it, build platform and build configuration. Variables are defined here in this section. Build configuration is release, build platform, any type of platform is okay for me. That's what I'm giving it. There's no very specific requirement of it, okay? So here in the first section, I'm saying the name of the pipeline. I'm picking up the pool here. Can you see here? A hosted Azure pipeline. I don't have a private hosted server yet, otherwise it would get listed. You see here, there are no agents. That means I don't have any hosted agents, self-hosted agents. Microsoft hosted agents are pretty secure because they don't allow anyone to log in into it. It's using your credentials, getting inside the servers. It's just configured for you for the time the execution is done. So security is there, no doubt in it. And here, it's not that you are mandated to choose Azure Microsoft hosted agent. You can have your self-hosted agent as well. If I have a very weird requirement of a server which is not present with Microsoft, I would not be able to choose the Microsoft hosted agent. Agent specification, what type of agent you want to pick. I'm just living with the standard one. My code Visual Studio 2017 is needed. Windows Server 2016 is good for me. So I'm not changing it. Coming to the build solution, back again. So this platform and the configuration is taken. If you have any very specific requirement, you can specify it here. There are test cases which are there in that repository that would automatically get built, and the test results also would get published. I'll show you where it shows whether the test cases have passed or whether they have failed. Now coming to the publishing. You can publish symbols and indexes. What happens? Majority of the time, I'm using a production machine to deploy my server, right? In that, I would not be having my build tools. So if I don't have the symbols and the indexes, it would be difficult for me to debug. So most of the time, we would be publishing our source indexes and symbols so that if I want to enable some debugging and all, that would be much more easier for us. Logging and all those stuffs would be. Normally, you would have heard that I can enable this level of logging and all, right? So we can do that because symbols and indexes are enabled in that particular piece of code. Now, coming to the publish artifact section, I would be publishing my artifact. I'm naming the artifact as drop, and it would be published in this pipeline itself. I'm not pushing that to the artifactory here. So it would be published and I can find it in the pipeline. So what we would do, all things look to be sorted. I've told what type of agent I need, what are steps to get executed, how it would build, command is also given. I would go ahead and save. You can say save and queue, or you can just say save for now. Just save it and it would not queue for the build. How we would queue the build process is either you step from here or you want to automate it. Then in that case, we will go to the trigger section. You see this trigger section? I want to enable continuous integration. You can put the checkbox here, or you want to do a, say, building on a specific time duration. You have a schedule. Every Monday at 2 p.m. I'll be building. Every Saturday on 6 p.m. I'll be building. You can specify such requirements. I just don't want to do that. So I am just not going with it. I'm just enabling continuous integration because I don't want to keep the time for the build. Rather, I want as soon as I make the code changes, the build should happen. So I've checked the tick mark. That's the only thing needed for your automated build to get triggered. I'll pick up the questions in case you people are posting the questions. Keep posting it. I'll pick up the question as soon as I do the changes and I trigger a build. So let me quickly go ahead and can we see the views folder? Yes. Hopefully that was shopping cart. Let me look at that. No. Just give me a second. Let me look into the code, which I will change so that it will change the version of the code. Just a minute. I have missed the path. Okay, in views it is in shared. It's in this. Okay, so if you see here, I had put it on string. Just next to the logo, there would be a version of the code showing up. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and write this as version 1. So I am uploading version 1 of my code. What we do git add dot and we do git commit. Let me quickly go back and use that command. Pretty lazy to type again. This is the third commit which we are doing, and we have updated our code for version 1.0. Git push origin master. Let's go here and check what happens to our pipeline. Oh, I hadn't saved. Let's see whether it picked up. So dumb. I did make the change, but I have not saved it. That's what we do most of the time. So going back here, making it 1.1. You can commit and add both in one go with this. -am command does 2-in-1 work. Can you see this? The build has been queued. And if I click on this, you would find there is a queuing happened. And here, if you see, it is looking for a server and it has found an agent. After that, it would start initializing the agent and it will make sure that the agent is available to do the job. So you can check the logs in every phase of the build process. It's just not that you can check the logs while it is building as well. So it will take some time for building. Meanwhile, let me pick up the questions. I think I have to scroll pretty up. Yes, Microsoft bought Git now. So GitHub, you can say Enterprise Edition is managed by Microsoft. Even the GitHub is managed by Microsoft. It is no more a competitor, correct? But it's an or option for you. Either you can host your code in GitHub or you can host your code in Azure Repositories. That I meant at that point in time. Sorry, I don't have your name to address you. Can I have a pipeline for each feature branch as well? Yes, you got to have a pipeline for each feature branch because each feature would be built separately. Nisha, it's not that I will build the entire feature, coding is done, and then I merge it with a different feature and then do build, right? Then I would not be able to identify which feature's bug is that. So every feature would be built, maybe say the frequency at which you're pushing your code, the team is delivering. Dependent on that could be that every day in the evening you do a build. That could be an option as well. Most of the time features get built every day, every other day, and the integration builds of multiple features also happen time to time. That is like a weekly ones. And the master branches are built bi-weekly. That frequency we keep. So every branch would be having a separate CI/CD pipeline, Nisha. So build execution has happened and build has succeeded as well, but I'll just pick up some questions and then move on ahead. We can roll back the code of a specific developer by removing that commit. We would have to undo the changes of that developer. So either you remove the changes in the developer end and then you do a commit again, so the changes would get rolled back. Or if you want to pick up only specific commits into your branch, that also you can do. That is called as cherry picking. Commits would happen, but you will have to reset your commits make sure there are n number of commands in Git with which you can reset your head, and you would not be having those commits residing in your branch anymore. So commands are there to handle that. I'm so sorry, you people have joined, so many people have joined with anonymous name. I'm unable to address them. Kindly, it's a request. If you people can join in with your name, that would be really good for us as well. We know you by name, at least if we don't know you by the face. We can use Git client like tar instead of command line, right? Yes, you can do that. You can use Visual Studio Code. Any IDE can be used for making the changes and pushing. I'm coming from a Linux background, so I'm more used to the command line interface. Now coming to a few other questions. Major difference between Azure Pipeline and Jenkins Pipeline. Ganesh, both are almost equivalent, but you would see that Jenkins Pipeline is a bit difficult to configure. You would have seen a lot of things are automated here. So the pipeline configuration you would have, if you have used Jenkins in the past, you would yourself find that it was pretty easy for me to configure. So I would say Azure Pipeline is a simpler version of Jenkins Pipeline. Both does the same thing, but in a simpler format. Yes, you can do that. SPF spec parts also can be built. Any type of code can be built rather. Can we see pushing code changes in different branches other than master? Yes, for that you will have to create branches, Sandeep. I have not created any branches. In case you fork and you create branch, you would have to execute git branch command, create a branch, make changes, and then push. Automatically, when you push, a branch would be created. How I did git push origin master. Suppose I've created a branch called as feature 1. You would be doing git push origin feature 1. So feature 1 branch would will get listed over here. Now, I'd answered this question. Is Helm an agent? Helm is not an agent. Helm is nowhere related to this. Helm comes from Kubernetes background. I'm not sure, in case you're confused with something. Asking as my code might reside with Microsoft for some time. Okay. Yes, it would reside. Your code is residing in the server, and the server goes off. So the server is not accessible to anyone. So there is nothing like a threat in that. Obviously, when they are providing, you can say that if I'm using SQL as a service from Azure, or I'm using platform as a service from Azure, I'm completely relying on their services. If you're not able to trust them that much, why will I move into your public cloud providers? We would have the recordings available, don't worry. What's the major difference? I've covered this. Azure Repos copies the code from other repositories like Git. Yes, it does, and you can use them here from other sources as well. You don't need to copy as well. If you want to have your code in Git or Bitbucket and you still want to just have your pipeline here, that also is possible. Yes, you can privately connect your Azure Devops with your self-hosted agents. Yes, you can do that. You can, where do you find your agent.exe? Wherever you just configure your agent, when you click add agent, it will ask which type of agent you want to build. I want to build an Ubuntu agent. It will give you the exe there itself to download Richa. So you don't have to take tension about it. They would supply the package. Only one job will run on agent if I'm not wrong. So I would like to know if I want to run 5 jobs at an agent at a time. So for that, you will have to configure parallel jobs. Parallel jobs is something which is not free. One parallel job alone is given. And in case you want to buy in more parallel jobs, parallelly multiple executions would happen. Yes, certainly you can do that. For that, you just need to go and configure that in your project settings. But yes, there is an option to do that. See, if you know YAML, most of the time your life is simple, Narasimha. In case you're a DevOps engineer, a lot of tools support that. most of the tools support YAML. Git is not a language, Git just has commands, but yes, you would have to learn a lot of commands as well. We can certainly use machine learning applications, no doubt in it. You have something called as ML Ops. Exact difference between CI and CD. Sanmukhi, CI is the way in which we are integrating our code and building it. CD is when we are deploying our code or delivering our code to the server. So first part, when you build it by integrating your code, so you can think repository and build pipeline as continuous integration, and the release pipeline where you just deploy your code, that is the CD part. Yes, for that, Nisha, you would have to pick up your multiple, say different parallel jobs you would need to have, and parallel CI/CD pipelines needs to be done. We can configure parameterized YAML templates as well. I showed you variable section. If you write that in YAML, that would be as a parameter given to YAML. Okay, so here I'm just proceeding further. I know there are a lot of questions. Logs are generated, logs are saved as well. You can find the logs every time over here. All logs can be seen, the symbols which were generated, the publishing here also, it gives the entire details where it has published. It even has help documents and all, so that you can read through that. So my pipeline has succeeded, the code has passed. Now it's come time to deploy it. So where you want to deploy would always be a question, right? So how we had an agent to build it. Same way, you will have to have an agent. My code is residing in a temporary location after the build, which is called as artifact. Just where's the mouse? So build has been done here, execution has been done here, and in the pipeline, your code is residing with a name called as drop. I'll show you that. I just missed to show you that. And in the release pipeline, I got to pick this and use another server. So how we had a build server, you would have a deployment server as well. Same agent taken for deploying. So this would do the deployment. This would interact with my actual servers and would do the part. Someone has to pick up the code from here and deploy it, right? That is this server. This will pick up the build artifact output. This is called as artifact, and would go ahead and deploy it. Obviously, which type of server? It will pick up the artifact and it will go and talk to your Azure account and get the thing sorted. So you got to authorize this guy to talk to your Azure account. This is very important thing. You got to authorize for this, and you have to tell where it has to deploy. So let's see how do we do that. So this part is done. I would create a pipeline. So if you see here, pipeline had two sections. One pipeline, which is the build pipeline, and the second one is the releases. I'm in the releases section. What type of deployment I want to do? I want to do the deployment in my app service. So I'm just picking up this and saying apply. What happens? It picks up the standard, say, format of the stuff, which makes my life easier. Stage 1, I'll call it as stage QA. Let me name it as QA. Stage owner is me. Just close this box if you're done. Here, you specify from where to pick the artifact. From this demo project, whenever this pipeline is built, I can get my artifact from there. That's what you're giving. Pick up the latest version of the artifact every time. and I say add. So what happens? It knows where to pick the artifact from, but it will not automatically trigger a deployment or a release. It's synonym, okay? Don't get confused by the word deployment or release. Both means the same. I am releasing my code or I am deploying my code. So here on the right hand side, on the topmost, do you see the symbol of a lightning? If you click on that, there is a button to toggle. I want to enable the deployment whenever there is a build success. Creates a release every time a new build is available. So as soon as my release, say build pipeline succeeds, the release will automatically get triggered. Now coming to this, it will pick up the artifact, but do what? So let's click on this. I have to specify my subscription to which I would be talking to deploy my code. So here on the drop down, you can see that there are some subscriptions present. I can say Azure, whichever subscription I want to give. If you're using the same account, it will automatically get populated. You just need to say authorize and that will get authorized. I want to deploy a web app on Windows. So once this authorization is done, I should get the app service name if it is existing. If app service is not existing, I will not be able to get that. So what I have done, I've already created app service and SQL Server and kept it. Let me take you to my Azure account. So here, the app service section. How will you create an app service? Just showing a demo, but I'll not be creating it. So here you can type app. You can say web app is the name. You can say app service. You can say web app. You would find it. Here you see web app. This is the one. Click on it. You can provide which resource group you want to create. Resource group is just to keep it as a placeholder for different types of resources, a container to have a set of resources together. So I am picking up an existing resource group. You can give a name for it. Say, let me say demo live QA. This is the name of my Azure Web App Service. Which type of runtime do I need to pick up? My code will build in my ASP.NET version 4.8. That is given. In which region you want to place your web app service? Let me pick East US. Here there are different plans. You can pick one of them. Your standard size of the server which is there, that has been given. I can create new one and pick it up. I'm just living with a standard one. If you just hit on create, it will go ahead and create a web app for you. And that web app would be a web app for the QA section. So here in the picture, where is it? Here in the picture, this is the app service which I'm building now. Okay, this is the app service for the QA. This will come in place if I hit on create. So it would, if I hit on create, it will say review and create. I'm not doing that. Same way, I'll bring another web app for the, say, the production one, right? I don't know, but the words are just hanging on the tip of the tongue, but they are not coming out. Sorry for that. So here, this is the QA one for me, and this is the production one. My web app needs to be configured so that it knows who's your backend SQL database. So what we have done, we have built a SQL database as well. If you come here and you say SQL, Azure SQL, create option is there. It will create, I want to create a database, a single database. Pick up in which resource group, the name of the database, you give a name for it, and you can create new server for it like this. You can give the server name, you can give the user server admin's name and the password for it, confirm it, in which location the server would be hosted, and in that hosted server you have the SQL database created. So If you fill in all the options, starting from the resource group, the name of the database, the name of the server, the admin user's credential, the username, and confirm the password, and where exactly the server has to host. And this is the configuration of your server. If you want to change, you can just hit on this. That would be a dragging bar where you can drag and drop and configure your server's configuration, the number of cores of CPU and the RAM which you want to give. I'm just saying okay, it will not take. So I've done this and all the things are sorted and up and running in this resource group. Let me show you that. I have a SQL server, I have a SQL database here, and when the SQL server receives the request from a web app service, it should allow that, right? That configuration also needs to be done. A lot of time people forget that. A request which is coming from your Azure web app, that needs to be granted by the SQL server. So here we should say the SQL server that, hey, you got to accept request from this web app services, right? That we would be doing. And web app should know which server to connect. So what we would do, here we would give our database details. And here also you would give your DB details so that it knows which DB is the backend for it. And on the DB end, you would be giving your front end details. Then only your front end and back end will connect. Otherwise, it will not connect and your website will not work because your front end is unable to send requests to your back end and your back end is unable to accept the request from the front end. So if you go to the SQL server, server is the one which needs to accept the packet. So you have a section called Firewall and Virtual Networks. If you have the IP addresses, you can write rules here. If you're just using some Azure services, here you see a toggle bar, say yes or no, and just say on save. Here you have to click on save. So that I'm saying allow Azure services and resources to access the server. So what happens whenever a request is coming from an Azure service, it would be the database would not be denying that particular packet that we are configuring. And if I go back to my this is my database which I have created. This is residing in that Azure SQL server which is there. Same way, I have created web app. This web app, this is the web app 1 and this is one web app. I have enabled application inside for it. These are the app service plans which are getting listed here automatically. A storage account is also created. All those things are residing in this resource group. If you want, you can delete this resource group in one go. Chuck all the resources which I've created for the demo would get cleaned off. So let me show you the app service. In app service, you will get an option here. This is the link to access your web application. Here, if you see, I've already opened the website and kept. This is the website which I had deployed just to confirm during the demo things works fine. And here, going back to this, you can access from here. If you have not deployed anything, it will just say, hey, welcome to app service. I need to configure my app service to talk to my SQL backend. Let's see that. Let me open another tab as well. So here in the connection strings, can you see there is a connection string created by me, this one. And here there is a huge string present. Where did I get the string from? This string, I got it from the SQL database. You have to give your username and password which you gave during the database creation. So this has to be kept in mind, and which type of server would be your backend that is being given over here. So if you see this, you would be giving the username and password, and you would be specifying where you would be connecting to. This is the connection string for you to connect to the the database at the backend. This is the connection string. It tells the server name, where it has to go, to which database, as which user and which password it has to connect. That you have to feed in. Please click on OK. Your database backend is known to it. But how did I get that string? Let me show you that. So we will go to our resource group again. This time we will get inside our SQL database. Do you see here connection strings? This database is showcasing its own connection strings here. So from here, I copy the entire string by clicking on this copy to clipboard. And I had to change my password here. Password is not shown up here. You would write the password and have it in the web app. So I have added the string on both the web apps, the QA web app and my prod web app, both the web apps. If I take you to the prod web app, I have done the same thing in the configuration section. In the connection strings, I have configured and shown up my connections here. See this. So this is all set. Just I need to configure these things in my pipeline. So this is my first pipeline in which I am in the release pipeline. In my first stage, I will be deploying that to Feb 09. We had changed our code from version 1.1, if you people remember. So this time when I deploy and if I open this web page, it will no more say 3.0. It will say version 1.1. That's what in our code. Let's quickly cat that and reconfirm it once. Did I cat it or rim it? I catted it. So this should be the one. Next to the logo, you see this version coming. That is what here. Unlimited paths, unlimited logo. This version would show up. This is done. I want to do one more thing. So I'm saving it. I'll go back to my all pipeline here. The pipeline which I've created is here. I can click on edit and edit that pipeline. One stage is configured. It is no more saying red here. If you just move your mouse here, you would find a clone symbol. Click on it. Give this guy a good name. I would say staging / prod. Here, one job and one task is not showing red because it already has the details which we had configured for the previous stage. So we got to change that. This time, I would not deploy it in the QA one. I would deploy it in my app service of prod. Quickly verify it is updated here as well. Done. So here it is saying that I'm going and deploying it in app service. I am choosing this Azure subscription. This is my tab of app service. This is the name of my app service. And I would be deploying it here. Now hit on save and say OK. Done. This pipeline should automatically get triggered and the deployment should happen in both the web app services, both in the QA and the production. So what we would do, we would go here and rather of 1.1, because I need to trigger a build, let's say 1.2 now. So the code which gets deployed is 1.2, not 1.1. So what we do, we would do a git add commit 1.2 and say push and wait for the build pipeline to succeed and then the trigger for the release pipeline to happen. So quick, immediate has started to run. Clicking on it in a separate window, let me open your release pipeline as well. Here it says no releases has been created. Automatically the release will get created. There is something, a pipeline. Each time the build happens, there is a word called release getting created. Release 1, release 2. We say we did multiple releases, right? That release would be shown up here. So here you have the pipeline execution and trigger. It is waiting for acquiring an agent, if you can see from the cloud. As soon as the agent is grabbed, the job execution will start. The agent request is ready, running, or has already completed. Now it has started. Can you see this? It has started to build as well. So this part we have seen. So I'll just keep my tab open for the release and wait for the release to get triggered. And meanwhile, let's pick up the questions. Voice is coming a bit low. Is it for everyone? Kopal, can you please confirm if the voice is good? We can integrate with Docker as well. Certainly, why not? Containers deployment is something which is very famous these days. And certainly we can deploy in containers. For that, you would have to do a Docker build and deploy that into a server which is running Docker, or you want to deploy that into your AKS cluster. That is also possible. So I'm just looking at the build pipeline. It is still running. So it was there in the next tab. Okay. Let's see whether, this release has got triggered. And you can see here two options. This stage is in progress. Let's click on that and quickly get into it. So here it is running on an agent, and here you can find what it would do on an agent. That agent's console is also visible. That's the beauty of it. You can see everything live here. And once you can see it just initialized, downloaded that artifact, and now it is in connect with my Azure account, trying to deploy my software. So just going back here, this is the place. Release 1, if you click, you would find you can go here. Last time I had clicked on the stage 1, it took me to the stage. This time I'm clicking on release 1. You can find the things here. You can check the logs as well here. This is succeeded. Awesome. This is now into queued state and it is triggering. You can find them that it has queued this for deployment. So here, if you see this has succeeded, that means my code is deployed in my QA. Let's pick the QA web app link. The DNS name shows up here. Let's copy this and this is the older one. I would go and open it here. Awesome. It's 1.2. Hopefully everyone can see that. It's pretty small. The last version which was deployed was 3.0. If I refresh this should also show 1.2. Yes. So 1.2 code is deployed in your, say, the QA environment. Now going back to your production. That was a slot. I'll be coming to the slot in a while. Production has succeeded. Deployment has succeeded. You can see here. Ran for 41 seconds and this stage has also finished. So once you have this entire finish, if you go to this pipeline, it will give you all greens over here with the tick marks. Your deployment to your production environment has also succeeded. So this is my prod web app. You can see there is a word prod associated to it. Copy this and paste it here. You should find 1.2 here as well. So using one pipeline with two different stages, I could deploy them in two different environments of mine. And my application front end and back end are connected. And That is the reason whatever data which is saved in the database are showcased here as well. So this is about the CI and the CD pipeline. Now coming to your questions, so many questions pouring in. Kopal, if you can quickly publish the questions, that would be useful. The agent is running on Ganesh. Same, even for the deployment and building of the code, we discussed about the Microsoft hosted agent. So that is that agent which we have picked up. That agent is running in Azure Cloud, but that is not with us. How are you creating the SQL with deploy pipeline and putting the connection string in apps settings.json? Yes, we can do that as well. I can even build the infrastructure using my pipeline. I can have the code for my Terraform or Ansible as well incorporated in my pipeline. Before deploying, I make my infrastructure and I deploy it. Yes, Sam, that's certainly possible. Can all TFS XMLs build? Sorry. One-to-one conversion, yes, tools are there using which you can convert, Saurav. How to integrate testing into CI pipeline like Jasmine or JUnit. So you would have seen that there are multiple tasks which are there here in the pipeline section. If I want to integrate any specific task, let me go into my pipeline. If I want to integrate any task, can you guys see here a plus symbol? You want to do JUnit, just type in that. If this guy supports this, it would help you integrate that. You want to do any particular type of build. I want to integrate SonarQube. I want to integrate any type of tools. I can do that. If you have written JUnit test cases, here all the options are given. These ways you can test it here. Publish your test results and all that. All utilities are given here itself. You can incorporate any task which suits you, the way you build it, or here all options shows everything. Jasmine, I'm not sure about, but yes, JUnit certainly we can do. Yes, Shanti, Azure Boards is very same too. Your Jira, whatever you can do with Jira, everything can be done with your Azure Boards. Can we apply multiple schedules and build on the same repo and save these fields under different folders? Yes, you can do that. Yes, you can do that. You can have a different pipeline altogether for it. The last question who has asked, instead of creating one pipeline, you have other pipelines, because here, if you see, if I go into this, sorry, if I go, not going into the release, here, if I edit it, you can even stop. Can you guys see here some symbols are there? When you want to deploy, that you can do. If you need approval to do a deployment, I can incorporate that. Auto redeployment, you want to do, something has happened and there is a redeployment needed, you can even configure that. You can configure some gates as well. Some checks to be incorporated, like to see whether there are no open bugs, or I want to monitor the status of my web app and then deploy it, I can do that. I want to invoke some functions, get some tasks, then I want to deploy. All those things can be done, no doubt in it. So if you don't want to do this way, you can have a separate stage also hanging here, or you can have a separate pipeline just for the deployment purpose, not if you don't want to do in a continuous one after the other. If you don't want to go, that is also possible. Okay, so now coming to the last part of it, we have deployed our code in your production. In production, I had mentioned that I'll be creating a slot like this. What's the advantage of a slot? Suppose I have platform as a service offering, the board is other way around. If I have a platform as a service offering, in that I can create a slot. Slot will give me an option. This can be slot 1 and this can be slot 2. Okay, you deploy your code here. This is called a staging. You want to spend a lot of times, people would say that I want a canary deployment, I want a rolling deployment, I want a blue-green deployment type of thing, right? I can even split my traffic. Suppose this is version 1.2 and here version 1.2 is running. Newly version 1.3 came and I deploy it here, test it here properly by diverting 50% of the traffic here and 50% of the traffic here. My 50% customers are happy. I swap this. When you swap, what happens? When I swap, it would bring this to 1.3 and this to 1.2. And that time I can direct all 100% traffic here instead of 50. So either you can go 0 to 100%, or you can go 50-50, you can go 30-70, whatever choice is yours, right? You have on what percentage of customers you want to test, or you just want to test it internally and then do a swap, that also can be done. So these two are entirely two different setups at the back end. You deploy your code in one setup, and this is another setup which is there. How you access your web app? You have a URL associated to this. You have a URL associated to it. At the backend, they're actually swapping the URLs. It's not actually the code gets swapped from here to here. That magic is not possible. So they just swap the URLs at the backend. Let me show you how do we create the slot and what do we make the changes for. Okay. What I had to show? I had to show the slots thing, right? Yeah. So here the deployment slots. You can add a slot like this, give a name to it, say slot 2. And if you want to clone from somewhere, you can clone. Like I had cloned from production and made production staging. So I did that. I'm just cloning from there and say add. I would have 3 slots now. I can deploy it anywhere and I can have it, my code running in one of them. So it will take a while. If you see, it is taking a while to get that slot created. At the backend, it is creating a replica of the infra which you are having for the production, and it would have one more set of servers which are running. That's happening at the backend. So it will take a bit of while. Done. Successfully created slots. You can see here, I can split my traffic. I can say 50% traffic going here, 50 going here, or 30% going here. And then I want to say 10% going here. I can make the changes. Here I'm not doing anything. I would just route the 100% traffic to staging. 3000%. So at present, the production is here, and this is the staging one which we have created. In the production, this traffic should be there. So I'll make this 0 so that that becomes 100. Production is having all 100% traffic. So I'm not making any changes as such. I'll just discard the slot as well rather than having one. So I have 2 slots here. Slot creation is pretty simple. You don't have to do. You just need to say which one you would be cloning, and when they are residing together, So obviously they would be the same, right? So I've cloned the prod and created a prod staging. Staging is always called as pre-production environment is called as staging. So what we would do, we would go and change our task. Now, instead of deploying in your prod environment, we would be deploying in the slot, a specific slot. So if you go to the deploy Azure App Service, click on this checkbox, deploy to a slot. You can specify the resource group. It will automatically come in the drop-down. Just wait for it with a little bit of patience. In which slot do you want to deploy? I'll deploy it in the staging slot. Then I will swap that code to the production. Okay. So done this. Let me save and show you what my production is showing now. And here the production link was already open if I'm not wrong. My QA is showing version 1.2. My production, can you see the word prod here? That is also showing 1.2. And what about this guy? Let me open the staging as well and keep it. QA and prod is not having the same configuration, Anutam. QA is having a separate configuration. The web app is different for it. I am having the same configuration for pre-production and production. And that is how it is always. My pre-prod is a replica of my prod. Okay. QA is a separate web app altogether. It is no way related to this guy. The web app is different. I'm deploying one time in this web app and the other time in this web app. So it's two different configuration which we have. Yes, we are trying to do blue-green deployment. So here you see 1.2, 1.2. This is giving some old junk code because earlier 4.0 was running. That is what it is showcasing now. Let's go ahead and make the changes. So my development team has checked in 1.3. Team has committed 1.3. Very simple to say, but I know it's difficult to do at the back end. Now coming to the pipeline, triggering has done. Let's go and wait in the release section. A new release will come. I'll just check whether I had saved the changes quickly. Awesome. So this will deploy in the staging one. Let's wait for the second release to come up. Till that time, let's pick up some questions. I got it. So prod picked up artifacts from QA. I understood that, but what's the difference? Obviously, whichever code is quality tested, that only you would be deploying, no, Anuta? Don't you think that? So we would be deploying something which is being tested, and that is the output of the QA environment or the test environment. That I'm picking up and I'm deploying. So my artifact which was produced, now which has passed my QA test, will move on to the production environment. That is what we are doing. So we would first move that to the staging environment, and then we would go ahead and put that in the production environment. Blue-green deployment, Abhishek, we will see how we would achieve it. Okay. We are planning to do blue-green deployment itself. So we would see that how we do it. So subscription parameters are taken automatically. You can even code them as a variable and supply in the drop down as a variable. So instead of giving the name from the drop down, Kalyan, you can even have them as a variable, and in the variable section you specify the value of those variables. That is also an option. certainly you can do that. Will Azure DevOps help in building on-prem solutions? Yes, Azure DevOps has an on-prem flavor as well. If you want to deploy in AWS, any cloud, on-prem, everything is fine. You can use Azure DevOps on-prem as well. In your organization, you already having the DevOps platform with Jira, Jenkins, is it advisable to migrate? So in case, Nisha, you're using Azure Cloud, then certainly yes. That's one of the best solution. Now you're using several tools and integrating them together. This can be a one-stop where all the tools can be found in a central place and everything can be controlled from the same one. Yes, we can do that with that, Naveen. You can even have your QA branch separate, your other branches separate. You can certainly have that. Technical skills which is needed for your Azure DevOps, you need to know basics of Azure a little bit, how to configure your, say, a virtual machine and all. We normally teach that in our Azure DevOps course as well, because a lot of time people are not that proficient enough with Azure. So we teach them the basics, like little bit of containers, little bit of Kubernetes, little bit of VMs, app service, SQL Server, those all things also we cover. I would not say, Narasimha, that it's difficult as a fresher to learn it. Why? Because it's simple. If you are starting from scratch in this era and you want to build your career in DevOps, then you can certainly do that. How do you stop the release from going to production after QA? So here I have not stopped it, but yes, you can make broken, this continuous line would not be there. You can just add something like this and you don't have this connection. This automated conditions checks can be done, or from here you can add a stage separately. This stage will run separate, this stage will run separate. You see this? This is no way related to QA. This will also pick artifact and deploy it in production. This will pick artifact and deploy it in QA. You can think of that sort. So now my pipeline wasn't built. Let's see what happened to that. Meanwhile, let me run through a few of the slides which I had kept for you people, just to showcase what all things are needed for this learning path. That is pretty important. So as an Azure DevOps course, when Microsoft is offering this DevOps solutions, they help you learn the basics of DevOps, the mental method, what do you think, what DevOps is, that part, that is the stuff. One sec. Where's my slide? I just wanted to open my Teams to see if there are questions. Okay, so they expect you to know a little bit of source control. Integration of tools is very important in Azure DevOps. So they expect you to see, a guy who is a DevOps engineer can't be a build engineer, can't be a deployment engineer, can't be a guy who is managing the entire Git. We have different people doing that in our actual projects, right? So what happens in such cases, we expect a guy to know how to integrate the stuff rather than being an expert in each and every tool of your Azure DevOps. So we learn about source control in this, and we learned about a little bit of artifacts, a little bit of managing the stuffs and all, and how to optimize the feedbacks, all those stuffs. So these are the important services which we would be talking about. These services are important. We would be discussing about that in our courses. We would first start with what exactly is Azure Board, how to plan, how to create a project, how to create an organization, how to create a team structure, those things would be covered. Then we would be discussing about the source control. Today we jump directly into source control because I wanted to show end-to-end. If I show people how to create a board, how to manage a task, it might not be exciting for them to attend a webinar, right? So here, the major section is of CI/CD pipeline. Even in the certification, even from a work perspective, that holds as one of the major pillars of your Azure Devops. You would be learning different types of source control. Source control is a centralized source control. You have a distributed version control system as well. We would learn about the types. Today, I just showed you the flavor of add, commit, push. You would be literally learning those commands. You would know, in case Azure Repository is there, how to do a backend of a Git, that also integrating with that, how to create branching, how to do merging of the code, how to create a pull request and send it for review, how to rebase your code, how to do different sorts of merges are there, like you want to squash all your commits into a single merge, or you want to pick up one commit and merge them separately. All those things would be taught in this particular module. Then we have the continuous integration. Now we have our code and our code repository. From there we start our build strategy, build pipeline. Here we even touch the flavor. Your code is residing like in TFS, or your code is residing in Git. How do you pick up your code and build that with your Azure build pipeline? That part is also there. In the integration section, we normally test the quality of the code as well. So what's the quality of the code is very important. I would not deliver a code which is not having good quality, right? So tools like Sonar, Cube and all, we can integrate and check about the code's validity or code's quality. That also we cover in this. We tell you how to integrate your Azure DevOps with third-party tools like Git, like Jenkins, like Sonar Cloud and all. We would touch about different types of deployment you would be able to do. You can deploy your code into virtual machine, which is infrastructure as a service. You can deploy it in app services, which I did right now, which is platform as a service. You can deploy it in Azure Functions. Service Fabric is their container orchestration platform, their proprietary one. Then you have Kubernetes as a service, or you want to deploy it in a app service as a container. All those options are there and you can have them. While deploying, a lot of times, like if I'm deploying a SQL server, I would not be keeping my SQL passwords and all as unencrypted, right? So I need to encrypt them, keep them in Azure Vault. So security aspect in DevOps, DevSecOps is very famous these days, right? So how to manage secrets, how to manage tokens, certificates, how to integrate them, most importantly with your Azure pipeline, that we would be covering, and how to deploy your services in Azure Web App, in virtual machine. And sometimes you will create web app manually, sometimes you would create web app using some tools, how to deploy in containers, how to do a Kubernetes deployment, how to do a Docker build. What's the difference between a Docker and a container? Like a half day, a good amount of 4 to 5 hours of time we spend in this, so that people learn a little bit basics about the Kubernetes and containers, which are trending technologies these days. Then finally, when we know where all we can deploy, we build our release pipeline and we deploy it. We deploy it using our Azure release pipeline. And if you say, no, Mamta, I am a Jenkins person and I want to deploy it using Jenkins, I would build it with my Azure pipeline and still go ahead and deploy it with Jenkins. I can build it with Jenkins and deploy it with my release pipeline, any combination possible. So integrating with Jenkins is also an option. When you're deploying, how you bring your infrastructure, that is also a question, right? Someone was asking, why will I manually go and create my web app and my SQL? Can't I automate? Certainly, why not? Infrastructure as an automation is also present. So we teach you how to integrate third-party tools like Chef, Ansible, Terraform. We pick one option out of it. We cover the basics of all of them, what exactly they are doing in the market, how they are competing, what all features do they have, how competitive they are. And Azure themselves has Azure automation. So we just take a glance of Azure automation with desired state configuration, but we integrate that with your Terraform. That we cover. Then finally, we touch base with artifacts, and many times when we are pushing our code, pushing our build output, we want to know whether licenses are proper. We want to know if open source security is there or not. So those things we can integrate with White Source Bolt. This is a compliance test tool. We can check our compliances with this. Security compliances for open source. Finally, we would be, I went one step up. Finally, the final section would be for the feedback mechanism. Anytime in DevOps, whenever you are doing anything, a feedback is a mandate, whichever stage you are in. So just a theory section to showcase what exactly we would be doing in the feedback, or what people need to think, or how do we integrate with the feedback that we do. So this is all about the course, which is of AZ-400. So our expectation is to learn DevOps process, use DevOps services, integrate them with Azure services, integrate some third-party tool, and set up a continuous integration and delivery pipeline, along with planning, testing, everything coming in the same bucket. So we would be integrating them with all the things. Now, meantime, let me go and check if my deployment has succeeded. Let's refresh this page. Is it still rotating? Strange. It's done. So we would go here, refresh. This is my production. No, this is my QA 1.3. My production would still say 1.2, and my staging with prod staging, can you guys see here? That would say 1.3. Now it's time to do a blue-green update. Let's do that. Let's go here, go to our web app, go to the slot and say swap. So from where to where you want to swap, that you are giving. My code is residing in staging and I want to move my code to production. It's well tested now. Done. In a while, your staging will become production and your production will become staging once this task is done. And once you refresh the page, you would find your prod staging would be 1.2. Yes, it's done, and your production would be 1.3. This is called blue-green deployment. Blue-green deployment happens with a click. Canary deployment and all, you have some canary users, you push newer version, older version is also running, newer version is also running, someone sees old, someone sees new. But in case of blue-green deployment, with a click, you just swap your stuffs. Okay, now coming back to the slides. So we have done this entire stuff. We have deployed our code in app service and in our production and in 2 stages, and we have done a swap as well. So we have set up the entire, from here I'm doing a code commit and it is triggering a build, it is triggering a release, and that release is happening in multiple stages. So that was all about today's webinar. I'll just close with the upcoming webinars which we have, if you guys have patience. There's one more free webinar of 2-hour session coming up on 303 and 304. It is Azure's Architect track. Sometime back we had done the track of webinar on 104. So if someone wants to become an Azure Architect, they can take either 104 or 204 and then take 303 and 304. So that's the track for it. We are also coming up with several instructor-led training programs in which we are offering sessions on weekends for 4 days, on Saturday and 4 hours, 4 hours on Saturdays and 4 hours on Sundays. Number of days of the class depends on the course which you have. So we provide Microsoft official curriculum because we are Microsoft Silver Learning Partner. We provide you $100 pass for doing your hands-on. We provide practice tests. Someone was asking if I refer the MS Docs on AZ-400 and then do test papers. I would say, Keshav, why not come to us and trust on us and invest in us so that we provide you with the entire end-to-end stuff. Even the exam vouchers comes in a very discounted rate with us. So you can give it a try. Hopefully you like the sessions. Now, 104 is starting on February 13th and end date is March 8th. It's a 4-weekend session, 8 days, 4 hours each day. AZ-400, which is DevOps track, is starting from February 27th. It would be ending on March 28th. And we have another track of 303 and 304, which would be on March 20th. So if you want to take a combo pack or something, that is also possible. And you can reach us to inquire more about this. If you have any technical queries related to this webinar, I have got all the questions at the back end. I'll try and respond to the critical ones, the crucial ones, because parallelly giving the session, answering the questions was not possible. And if I just keep answering the questions, it may feel a bit boring for others, right? So I'll answer the questions at the back end. I have your mail ID, so I will be responding back. That's the reason I was requesting you guys not to join with anonymous names so that it becomes very difficult as to match and reply back to your questions. So this is our phone number. You can reach us by calling or doing a WhatsApp message. And this is our sales ID. You can even drop us a message on this in case you're interested to take any courses with us, or you are planning out, or you have any queries related to Azure. We work on DevOps, we take consulting projects as well on machine learning, AI, DevOps, Kubernetes, Docker, a lot of technologies we work. So Gopal, I think I'm done. I'm 2 minutes shooted up.
Thank you so much, Mamta. So as Mamta mentioned, in case if you have any questions, any doubts, you're most welcome, or you would like to know about any of the courses, please do feel free to reach out to us on our sales ID, that is sales@techscalable.com, or you're most welcome to call us or write us back via WhatsApp on the number that has been mentioned on the screen. We will be really looking forward to have you guys for our trainings, future trainings. Thank you so much, Mamta.
Upcoming webinars as well, Gopal.
I beg your pardon, sorry.
No, I'm saying upcoming webinars as well.
Yes, please do join us.
Yeah. So Shell is asking if these courses are valid for how long, and do we provide access to videos as well? Yes, Shell, we would be providing recording of the class, which would be accessible to you lifelong, and you would be having practice test questions as well accessible. So you can access them, and if you're not preparing immediate for the exam or you want to come back and listen to the class recordings, certainly that option is also available with us. Srihari, the link for the upcoming session is not ready. I'm sorry for it. We would be posting on LinkedIn. You can follow us on the group. You can follow us on our LinkedIn webpage of TechScalable. We would be posting about the new upcoming webinar in a day or two. Hope you people like the session. Please keep joining us repeatedly for our sessions in case you're liking it and you think that you're gaining something out of this. It was really a wonderful session hosting this for us, for me and Gopal and Shiva. Thanks a lot, guys. And hope to see you guys next time. Thank you so much.